It's time for Positively Kansas. Coming up, the unexpected and abrupt end to the basketball season left a lot of fans upset. But don't despair. We'll rediscover a monumental moment in the game's history that helped cement Kansas as one of the epicenters of basketball worldwide. Also, a big city trend has hit small-town Kansas. If you've been packing on the pounds lately, here's a way to get in shape and still get your drink on. Plus, in our Wichita Destination segment, we'll explore the rich history on display at the Kansas African American Museum. And in our Kansas Wild Edge report, we explore the fascinating courtship rituals of Pintail ducks. I'm Sierra Scott. Get set for a half hour of information and inspiration in this week's edition of Positively Kansas.
Positively Kansas is brought to you in part by Visit Wichita, bringing you Wichita destinations on Positively Kansas. Wichita, the heart of the country.
Before investing your hard-earned money, make sure your financial advisor understands your objectives. Mark Douglas, CFP, serving our community for over 20 years, providing customized financial solutions that focus on the individual.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas serves more than 930,000 Kansans in various programs. Independent, member-owned. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, an independent licensee of Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association, supports KPTS.
Program support provided by the F. Price Kosman Memorial Trust, Entrust Bank Trustee, bringing you the Kansas Wild Edge segments on Positively Kansas.
The cancellation of March Madness left many basketball fans devastated. There was no conclusion to the season for teams preparing to compete for the championships. But while there are no new tournament victories to celebrate, there are a lot of great ones from the past for Kansans to remember. Jim Grayway has the story of an amazing team from McPherson, Kansas that took on the world and won. Yet a lot of people don't know anything about it.
There have been a lot of great moments.
Wichita State is going to the Final Four.
The state of Kansas is ground zero when it comes to heroics on the hardwood.
Rock Chalk Championship. Kansas takes the title.
From the Jayhawks and Shockers of today to the very beginnings of the game invented by Kansan James Naismith, it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to rename the Sunflower State the Basketball State.
What a performance from the Shockers.
And Kansas has an even bigger place in basketball history than many realize, because a lot of people don't know anything about the McPherson Globe Refiners in the 1936 Olympics.
When I first found out about it, I was pretty amazed that here this team from a little town in the middle of Kansas went on to worldwide fame.
Curator Brett Whiteneck says the McPherson Museum is in the process of creating a permanent exhibit to showcase the story. It's a story about the team whose home court was this small auditorium in this quiet central Kansas town made up of employees from the local oil refinery that proved to be the best basketball team in the world. It is a story that starts in 1933, when the Globe Oil and Refining Company opened a refinery in McPherson. Like many businesses at the time, the refinery started a basketball team.
During this time, the college game wasn't as big as it is today, and you didn't have the NBA. And so if you wanted to see good quality basketball, you went to an amateur athletic union sponsored game. The AAU would have these teams that were sponsored by businesses or companies, and they were using these as sort of a marketing ploy for them and help advertise their business.
So companies would recruit employees just for their basketball skills.
They all were hired and had jobs in the refinery, but we need to be clear, really their main job was to come play basketball. And they were really good.
The company hired Wichita State coach Gene Johnson, who recruited two of his former Shocker stars to play on the team. Johnson was an innovator who helped transform the game.
What he fought against was kind of the conventional wisdom of basketball in the 1930s. It was supposed to be slow. You had a lot of passes. You worked it around, and you played a pretty slow brand of basketball. And so this team was called unorthodox and a lot of other names, but the fact of the matter is they were good and talented and athletic and played a faster game and were very successful at it.
Rich Hughes grew up in McPherson and is a huge basketball fan. He now lives in the Kansas City area. He wrote a book all about this team from his hometown, which he had never heard of until 2004 when he happened to read an article in the New York Times. The story explained that the slam dunk was invented in the 1930s by a team called the McPherson Globe Refiners.
And this is a community building where I'd gone to pancake feeds and about this time of year in March and done some Boy Scout projects. I didn't know that the best basketball in the world in 1936 was played right there in McPherson, Kansas.
In 1936, this was the first time that they were going to have basketball as an Olympic medal sport.
The United States qualifying tournament in New York included the top two AAU teams, which were the Globe Refiners and the team from Universal Pictures in Hollywood. Also invited were the top 5 college teams and a YMCA squad. This was the first time the New York media had ever seen a team like McPherson.
When they went to Madison Square Garden, this team was billed as the tallest team in the world. Now, they didn't do this during the games, but before the games, especially Joe and Willard would jump up and dunk the ball. And it did two things. One, it got the crowd excited. They'd see this. They'd never seen this type of basketball before. And two, it would intimidate the other team. So a newspaper reporter basically said, those McPherson boys reach up and they dunk the basketball into the net like I would dunk my donut into my coffee. And that's where the term dunking the basketball comes from.
The Refiners and the Universal Pictures team were the top 2 finishers in the tourney. They combined to form the 14-man squad that went to Germany to represent the United States. Wichita basketball fan Colin McKinney finds all of this fascinating.
I think it's amazing how few people know the story. I think it is one of the most amazing basketball stories that isn't really told. Picture, if you will, the long voyage on the ship to get there and to have to practice on the deck of the ship, to make sure that you're maintaining your skills. And when you get there, you've got, I believe, 26 teams competed in that Olympiad.
The United States beat Mexico in the semifinals, then took on Canada for the gold in one wild game.
The Germans decided that all the sports should be played out of doors. So the basketball portion, all the games were played on modified clay tennis courts. During the gold medal game, it starts to rain. And it didn't rain a little bit, it really came down. It turned this clay court into a quagmire. They go to dribble the ball, it'd stick in the mud.
And so you can't even dribble the ball in the championship game. So if there's nothing else, that attracts you to basketball, this is an amazing story.
4 McPherson players played the entire game and led the U.S. to victory over Canada 19-8. Colin McKinney was also fascinated a few years ago when he stumbled upon this fact. Every athlete who won a gold medal in 1936 was given a small potted English oak tree, the national tree of Germany, to take home with them.
My first thought was, okay, we've got a treasure hunt here. Did any of those oak trees make it back to McPherson or Kansas?
McKinney's investigation revealed that in 1990, team member Francis Johnson, who had discarded the original tree he'd been given in 1936, was given a sapling grown from an acorn off one of the originals. He donated the tree to Wichita State, where it was planted on campus. But over the years, the plaque next to it had disappeared, and exactly which tree it was seemed a mystery. McKinney then went to Associate Professor Emeritus George Platt, who remembered the tree and pointed it out, growing near the Radigan Student Center.
once it had been identified, everybody got excited about it again. You know, we were seeing a resurgence of the men's basketball program at the time, and it just made good sense. Let's take this tree from its place of obscurity and move it a little bit closer to what we're doing over here at Koch Arena.
It was still small enough to transplant, so WSU officials agreed to have the tree moved here to this location just outside Koch Arena, where basketball fans can see and appreciate it.
You can see magic in it or not, but if you attach the timeline, that tree was rededicated in its new location in October of 2012. And in April of 2013, our team went back to the Final Four for the first time in 48 years. So I think the moving of the tree had some significance upon what's going on here at Wichita State.
The refinery disbanded the Globe Refiners team after the gold medal win. In later years, the players gathered for some reunions, but now that they've all passed away, the tree and the museum exhibit keep the story alive. What a moment in history when McPherson, Kansas produced the best team in the world, bringing home the first gold medals ever awarded in basketball. For Positively Kansas, I'm Jim Grayway.
Because of World War II, there wasn't another Olympics for 12 years after that. Of the 19 Olympics that have included men's basketball, the United States has won the gold 15 times. It's not unusual to see people drinking water while working out, but the athletes in this next story like to drink something a little stronger. Anthony Powell has the story from Mulvane.
There is not a more popular workout than yoga. Great for the mind, body, and soul. In recent years, all kinds of variations have popped up. Even goat yoga.
Finding some calm.
So if goat yoga can be a thing, why not yoga while sipping adult beverages? It can be, and was, as Luciano's and the Mulvane Rec Center teamed up for the first beer and wine yoga event ever held in the small town.
I'd read about it, that there's a place in Wichita that does this.
Ricky Tucker is the Mulvane Rec Center's program director. Tucker thought if beer and wine yoga is a hit in Wichita, folks in Mulvane would like it too.
When we start advertising, I think we set 20 as our maximum, and I would say within 3, maybe 4 weeks of registration, we had 20 spots filled, so there was some excitement.
The night of the actual event, there was plenty of enthusiasm as we spoke to some participants during a break.
But this was very relaxing. Having the wine was really nice.
Because really the premise of beer and wine yoga is you do your yoga stances and all that with the beer in your hand. Now we're going to give the people here the option of, if they're not real sure about doing that, they can set their beer off to the side or their wine.
It didn't seem to take very long for these folks to get in the groove. Some of them do yoga regularly, but of course, never while consuming alcohol.
I've done yoga before to solve some back problems, and my wife and I love Luciano, so we decided to come out and have some wine and do some yoga. It was a good time.
The question is though, have you ever done wine, or have you ever done yoga with wine?
No, this was the first time. It's going to be hard to go back.
Meanwhile, besides the socializing and workout, the gathering's goal was to try and encourage more people to incorporate yoga into their daily routine.
You know, we offer yoga classes at the rec center, 3 or 4 different disciplines of yoga, mornings, evenings. So ultimately, I'd like to see those classes pick up some new participants.
Based on what we heard, looks like he'll get his wish.
It's a very calming experience, and a lot of times you're so rushed and in such a hurry in your everyday life, you need to take that time to relax and to stretch, and I think this is a good reminder of that. And
in Mulvane, I'm Anthony Powell for Positively Kansas.
Organizer Randy Tucker says the beer and wine yoga was such a success, he's planning to organize another one soon. From the Underground Railroad to Brown versus the Board of Education and the Dockham sit-in, Kansas has played a major role in the push for civil rights. Meanwhile, the richness of African American culture has helped shape our way of life in the state's largest city of Wichita. In this week's edition of Wichita Destinations, Brian Ramsdale visits a dynamic treasure trove of African American history that's sure to inform and inspire.
Kansas has a unique history, again, because of its relationship with the Civil War and slavery.
When you look at Wichita's black history, there are so many outstanding people here, or from here now.
There is a community here that has a rich history to add to the African American story.
Wichita has a history that many don't realize exists. A fight for equality, a fight for freedom. The African American community in Wichita stood up many times for what was right, either to help build this city up or bring civil rights to their community.
We've had family members and friends come from Oklahoma, Denver, California, and they want to see old Wichita. They want to see the history, the foundation, what built this city.
From a vibrant African American community at the inception of the city to one of the earliest lunch counter sit-ins in the nation, the African American story in Wichita is one you need to know.
Everyone who comes to the museum to find out more about the significant contributions that Kansans have made in Wichita, Kansas, and nationally.
Denise Sherman is the executive director of the Kansas African American Museum.
We want people to find out more about how Kansas was not only a free state, but was very controversial, having African Americans or former slaves relocate to Kansas and actually establish this wonderful territory.
The museum is the place where the history of Black Wichita is documented and preserved. Sitting in one of the oldest African American built structures in the city, the museum is home to photographs and relics and items you won't find anywhere else.
The Kansas African American Museum is the hub of Black history in Wichita.
It's very important that this museum exists.
That everything that they look at, like Hattie McDaniel up there, okay, like Chester Lewis, these are individual names from here that made worldwide history.
They do a good job in the exhibits of giving you a crisp, fresh look at subject matter that can make sense to you as far as a story.
It's a story worth knowing. Wichita has a history of being a place of peace, even dating back before Wichita was even called a city.
This is when the town came to where the two rivers come together. It was an area where Native Americans, even if they were warring tribes, they would come here during summer months, fish, hunt, do everything they needed to do to prepare themselves for the winter and then go back to wherever the tribes were located. But while they were here, this was like the United Nations, no warfare.
Wichita is home to Hattie McDaniel, the first African American to ever win an Oscar. She won that award by playing the role of Mammy in Gone with the Wind.
I'm going to speak to your mom about you.
Even before segregated schools, Wichita had an impact.
Kansas embraced the idea that all people could go to all the schools. So if you were African American or even an Indian, you were allowed to attend a white school. Therefore, the promotion of integration was celebrated.
Today, there is a new way to celebrate the rich culture Wichita has, and it's an interactive experience that starts with your phone.
Users could experience this area through the lens of someone who lived here back in the 1920s or the early 1900s at the beginning of the inception of Wichita.
There's a walking app you can download on your phone that takes you on an assisted tour through the area of Wichita where the African American culture had an impact.
Having the knowledge that there were places and spaces built by people just like you can help to enrich and encourage other people to continue to learn.
Following key stops, people can see on a map where an important building used to stand, photos of what it used to look like, and even read up on why that building was important.
Prior to how the community looks today, there was another community that provided a rich culture for African Americans.
There is a history that isn't only important to Wichita, but to everywhere across the country, from the artifacts and literature to the building. Having these items preserved and displayed at the Kansas African American Museum lets people learn more about what really matters.
It's an awesome feeling to see this building?
I think people come here because they want to know the history of Wichita. And in many cases, we always have something that is in the showcase or in the exhibit that's going to give people an idea of who we are here, or where we've been, and actually where we're going.
The Kansas African American Museum is open Tuesday through Saturday. We'll take you to another exciting Wichita destination next week. Now to the great outdoors, where love is in the air and on the water. Mike Blair captured it on video in this week's edition of Kansas Wild Edge.
One brown duck, a dozen white ones. Why is this grouping always a center of activity in late winter duck migration? It's a courtship ritual for northern pintails, and it always results in a special show for those who visit wild, often icy waters in March. Pintails are in a hurry to reach northern nesting grounds, but every headwind forces a temporary delay in their marathon flights. And for pintail drakes still unpaired, these are days to show off strength, flight, and dance skills to choosy ladies yet to select a mate. Most pintails pair earlier in winter, but younger birds often court along the way. It's a frenetic time when 5 to 20 drakes may vie for single females. And the courtship activity is always easy to spot. Find a brown pintail hen with handsome drakes rushing about, and then settle in to watch. The game is simple for the males. Stay as close to the hen as possible, fighting and showing off to prove their worth. On water, this often involves abrupt dance moves with a soft whistle. The long black pintail, for which the species is named, is a key visual, whether thrust skyward or waggled in flight. And the drakes are quick to flog and bite potential rivals that try to displace them. The hen leads the group on merry chases, sometimes pushed into the air, other times initiating the race herself. But she always directs the flight, often sharply turning or diving to check her suitors' agilities. The sum is almost always an elegant ballet, with orchestrated turns and swoops that may last several minutes before returning to water. Many such groups occur around busy marshes, and other duck courtship flights may be noted as well. But none are as acrobatic and fast as those of pintails, often dubbed greyhounds of the air for their special abilities. What a show, with no tickets required. I'm Mike Blair for Positively Kansas.
Next week, Mike captures the breathtaking beauty and diversity of the colorful Kansas sky and shares an original song he wrote. And speaking of sky, severe weather brings storm chasers from around the country to Kansas each spring. It was a movie made in the 1990s that's often credited with inspiring the growing trend of amateur weather watchers. It was shot just down the road, as Chris Frank shows us.
Come on, guys, let's go inside.
The Twister Museum is easy to find on Main Street in Waukeeta, Oklahoma. Waukeeta is about
85 miles southwest of Wichita, only 6 miles south of the Kansas border. Waukeeta is a rural community struggling to keep its 2010 census population of 344 from fading away. That's an 18% drop from the 2000 census. The town's biggest claim to fame in recent years is being the primary filming location for the Hollywood movie Twister, shot here in 1995 and released the following year. The movie, starring Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton, is about competing storm-chasing teams pursuing an F5 tornado.
Let me explain how the Twister Movie Museum came to be here. This building on Waukeeta's Main Street served as the movie's home office while production was going on here. But once the movie was completed, well, Waukeeta's Garden Club took a hold of the building and turned it into the Twister Movie Museum.
Let me introduce you guys. How are you?
Hi. This museum makes Waukeeta a destination, particularly for tornado chasers and movie buffs who like the film.
I'll give you a tour here.
Linda Wade has volunteered at the museum since it opened. She's now its caretaker until she says she can get someone else to take the job. On this day, Lanny Dean, founder of Extreme Chase Tours, brings 3 clients to the museum after the group chased and spotted tornadoes the evening before in south central Kansas.
The movie Twister brought storm chasing mainstream.
And that, he says, opened up business opportunities for folks like Dean to offer tours while pursuing their storm-chasing passion and alerting the public of severe weather.
So these doors came out of a set.
Several thousand tourists have traipsed through these doors over the years. Linda says the movie Twister put and keeps Waukeeta on the map.
Waukeeta is well known around the world anymore because of the movie Twister. You can talk to anyone and say Waukeeta, and they eventually come up with the movie name.
Wow, that was cool. Yeah.
Well, this little museum about the movie Twister may have you making such exclamations also, while giving you an education about tornadoes as well as an insight into the making of a Hollywood movie. In Waukeeta, Oklahoma, this is Chris Frank for Positively Kansas.
The Twister Museum is open from April through August, Tuesdays through Saturdays in the afternoon. Admission is free, but they welcome donations. Be sure to take cash because the gift shop doesn't take credit cards. Well, that's a wrap for this week. Please send your story ideas to positivelykansas@kpts.org. We always need them. Until next time, I'm Sierra Scott. We'll see you again soon.
Program support provided by the F. Price Kosman Memorial Trust, Entrust Bank trustee, bringing you the Kansas Wild Edge segments on Positively Kansas.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas serves more than 930,000 Kansans in various programs. Independent, member-owned. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, an independent licensee of Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association, supports KPTS.
Before investing your hard-earned money, make sure your financial advisor understands your objectives. Mark Douglas, CFP, serving our community for over 20 years, providing customized financial solutions that focus on the individual.
Visit Wichita, bringing you Wichita destinations on Positively Kansas. Wichita, the heart of the country.